All right, thank you for that. That was beautiful. I was going to say, saying that every time you do it, I just feel more power coming from it. It's like a prayer, just a beautiful prayer. We can't think of words to say. God is, God is, God is, God is. So we are in the midst of a series we started a couple weeks ago, and it's based upon this really cool book called Emergence, 7 Steps for Radical Life Change. Radical because all of the changes are inside. And radical is, there's lots of different ways to understand radical, but in the context of this book, radical means essential or fundamental. It means the very essence of our being. So the kind of change that we are looking for in the context of this particular series is for us to bring forth that which already is, as opposed to the kind of changes that we typically think about as the external life changes and, rearranging our life and changing this out here and changing that out there. And that's the way that the surface mind tends to think about how life could be radically changed. And what we're really here for, because we are in a spiritual community and we have spiritual laws and spiritual principles, is that we are designing a program to change our lives from the inside out. And that happens as a result of us becoming more keenly aware of what we already are, of this somewhat missing awareness that you and I have of the spiritual being that we are, of the qualities of love and life and wholeness and peace and joy, which are at the heart of us. And so that instead of us trying to change things in the outer so that we can then feel okay inside, we're really seeking in the course of this study, as we always are really, is for us to discover what's already so, what's already true, and then find ways of allowing that to emerge in our awareness. Does that make sense? So it's really important that we understand the context for what we're doing together so that we don't get confused, because the ego, that part of us that feels separate from the whole, that's always in a state of want and lack, will be looking for steps to take that will be active steps. And what we're going to be doing here is, instead of defining active steps to take, we're going to be looking at ways of shifting our consciousness, okay? So that's what we're doing. That's what we're usually up to around here, but just so we know what radical life change is about. All right, I got to read and look over the mic, so this is multitasking for me. So we started week 1 with the idea of emergence, and we said, what is emergence? But it's a natural unfolding of our divine potential. So natural unfolding of our divine potential. It isn't some sort of forced transformation. It is what already wants to happen in us. And we said that it's a radical path, and it's radical because there's really nowhere to go. So that's about as radical as it gets when you think in terms of growth. There's no goal to achieve, no place you have to go. There's only this continuous self-discovery, discovering who we are. And of course, we say here our mission is to realize and express our divine nature. There's these paradoxical aspects of this, that the harder we try to do something, the more it slips away. Have you noticed that? That effort sometimes is not the best way to evolve spiritually. That effort is actually contraindicated in spiritual work, because effort suggests that there is something that has to happen at a future date, and that we have to make something happen. And spiritual reality says it's already here and now. So emergence is an evolutionary principle that brings the divine pattern within us into greater and greater expression. That's what we're about. So last week we said the idea is for us to see the completed vision, to see the completed vision. And of course, that's consistent with what we're talking about, that the vision is already complete, but we have to see it. The wholeness, the divine self that we are is not something that we have to create, something that we have to affect. It's that which we need to simply see. And we talked about this notion that we shift our thinking from some external thing that we believe will satisfy us, to allowing and making welcome that which already is emerging, the qualities of our being that are locked up inside this limited sense of self that you and I carry most of the time. Robert Browning said it very beautifully. He said, "It's opening out a way whence the imprisoned splendor may escape." So take a moment with me, close your eyes, and think in terms of what we are here to do is to open out a way and see where that idea lands in you, to open out a way. What is it that needs to open? Opening out a way. When the mind is always seeking something to come to us, when we say we are here to open out a way, how is that a different feeling? And here at Unity of Santa Barbara, we say we're here to realize and express our divine nature. And so there's this inner discovery that we're about here. You can open your eyes. There's this inner discovery that we're about here. It's this recognition. So it begins inwardly, and then once we discover it, this impulse is that it wants to reach out. It wants to go out. It wants to become expressed. It doesn't belong as a held understanding. It's nature. It's the nature of all of life to express, is to grow, is to extend itself, is to move from the formless dimension of possibility and potential and growth to the manifestation. And so when we understand that this divine presence and power and love that is within us is seeking to express itself, then we realize that our work in this is to give it space, is to believe in it, is to allow it, to make it welcome. Does that make sense? It's a different feeling from this way that the world oftentimes talks about our lives changing, because so often life change is associated with something happening in the outer. And we're okay with things happening in the outer as long as that isn't the starting block, that we don't seek outer change in order for us to feel good inside. If outer change comes, it comes as a result of us matching up with the vibration of who and what we are. And not from a place of not enough. And so often we try to manifest life to fill a need or to feel something that's empty inside of me, that if I could somehow find a way of doing something, or someone would be a certain way, or life would show up a certain way, I could fill this illusory hole, running around life like some Pac-Man or something, eating, and never being filled. This is the chasing our tail sort of analogy of seeking it, not finding. So last week we concluded with this idea that in order for us to vision and to see the completed vision, one way of doing that is to actually feel into what it would be like if we were fulfilled. And so whatever it is that we're seeking in life, whether it's in a relationship, a feeling of being loved and appreciated, or whether it's feeling more abundant in our life, instead of looking for some specific manifestation, we know what it would feel like if we were abundant. We know what it would feel like if we felt loved. And that we feel into these experiences in advance of any such manifestation, not because we're trying to make it so, but because we're trying to match up with what is already so. That we are already love. We are already abundant. So we're not here to try to trick our mind into believing something that is not true. We're trying to trick our mind into understanding what is already true and so. And so we talked last week about doing this process where we would feel into what it would be like. Let's say you had all the money you needed. Let's say you had the relationship of your dreams. What would you be experiencing? And what you would be experiencing is not just a future, but it is actually your true nature, my true nature. That if I am connected with my wholeness and my self-worth, and I am experiencing love, then it's not conditioned upon how someone else is treating me or acting in my presence. It is rooted in the recognition of me bringing forth that sense of wholeness and well-being. So as we use the analogy of the acorn, and the acorn being that which already has the seed and the design and the DNA and the blueprint for the full oak tree, so you and I have the design and the DNA and the blueprint for the fullness of our being, for the full expression and the possibilities of our lives, to be fully actualized spiritual beings, that we already have that within us. That is the promise of every teaching at its core. That is the message of every master teacher, is that you and I are made in the image and likeness of this wholeness and this love and this well-being. And that the problem is not in the programming, that we already have been programmed. You know, the program's already been installed. But now we need to correct perhaps the operating system, the context in which that program is now trying to operate so that it can operate more fully and more completely. Does that make sense? I was a geek for a long time, so see, I speak in terms of operating systems and stuff. But I am so out of date in that particular area that I'm sure there's better metaphors. But we do understand operating systems, yes? And operating systems, in the case that we're talking about here, will be our feelings and our thoughts and our consciousness. So that is the field that can be shifted, can be modulated in order to become more receptive and more congruent with what's trying to emerge in us. So that's where the work is. Even though it's an effortless process spiritually, in the sense that you and I are in a body, in the sense that you and I, walk around with a limited understanding of the wholeness of our being, that there is something for us to do. I mean, I hope you have the blessing of being able to just spontaneously awaken and all sense of limitation goes away. But for most of us, it's a progressive realization over time. And there are things that we can do to coax, to cajole this sometimes reticent willingness to see what we really are. And we can create the conditions, and that's what we're talking about today. We can help cultivate the conditions by which this kind of growth can work the best. And so just when we think in terms of nature, we think in terms of we plant a seed in the ground, we know that the condition of the soil, the temperature of the soil, the amount of nutrients, the water that it receives, all those conditions are not secondary. They are secondary in a sense, but they are not unimportant. The same for us. That you can have the best seed or the best bulb and stick it in the soil, and if that soil is not conducive to the growth of that plant, it will not grow. And the same for us. We are all seeded for greatness. We're all seeded to be fully self-realized sons and daughters of God. That's who we are. And that will never change, and that the quality of that seed will never be diminished. But the quality of the emergence, the quality of our expression, will be influenced by the conditions in which we grow, in which we are allowed to grow, or which we are stifled from our growth. So, Derek Rydell, who is the author of this book, he has a number of different ways of talking about it. He has 3 sole purpose pillars for your vision. And those 3 sole purpose pillars are: how would you feel, who would you be, and what would you do if you were living fully? So how would you feel, who would you be, and what would you do if you were living this full potential? And what we're going to talk about today is how would you feel and who would you be, in large part. We're going to talk about next week, what would you do. We're going to get more into the active part of it. But how would you feel? How would you feel? Because we know that it's our feeling nature that really supports transformation. It doesn't really matter what we think if we don't have a feeling that goes with it. Do we know that's true? That feelings are really the drivers. In fact, people that are in the business of selling things on the marketplace realize it's more important to get someone into a feeling experience around something that they would like to sell them than a thinking experience. And that's even true for people who think that they're so rationally minded that they made a decision to buy something. Yes, I bought this $85,000 car for all the rational reasons, the gas mileage and how long the car would last. But really, when the salesman got in and revved the engine and pointed out the leather seats, there was an emotional reaction, yes? And we understand that. So if we can get our emotions involved in this that we want to grow into, that we want to emerge, then we really have a much better chance of coaxing that which sometimes remains dormant, remains unable to completely explode and reach the light, which is the light of our awareness. So how would you feel, and who would you be? And who you would be, of course, is who you already are. But we can think in terms of being as being more like how you would feel as a being. In other words, how you would feel as a father, how you would feel in your employment, how you would feel as a member of the community. So who would you be if you were understanding that this divine potential that you had in you was fully realized? And it affects, of course, across all areas of our life. All aspects of how we express ourselves in life are affected when we grow from inside out. He has this statement in there, which is quite powerful. He says, at the soul level, if you achieve something in the world, but you don't evolve spiritually, you've achieved nothing. Have you ever had an achievement in the world that left you feeling empty? Is anyone? The same three every week. I'm going to stop tipping people before the service about who needs to raise their hand. We'll get some honesty here. Okay. You may have heard this before. What does it profit a man if he gains the world, but he loses his soul? And Derek has his own take on that. He says, what does it profit a man if he gains the world, but doesn't grow? Think about that. Think about that. Think about, in terms of what is your purpose for this life. As we mature, we move from, sort of like checking the boxes of what it's going to take, to have arrived in life, right? First of all, we just want to grow these bodies to full stature and want to get through puberty, and, we want to get through that whole experience, and then we want to have relationships in our life, and maybe we have goals for family, maybe we don't, but then we want to have a career, we want to know who we are in the world, and that we can make our mark, and we can earn money, and we can, have choices in our life and independence, and we can do these things in the world to sort of find our way in the world. And then as we've done that after a while, and we kind of maybe look around and go, I'm not quite happy yet. Has anyone experienced that? Yes. Thank you. You're so kind. But we understand that a point comes at the satisfaction level that we have associated with achievement and gaining the world, so to speak, has a layer of satisfaction not to be disregarded, not to be dissed in any way, but to say, is that all there is? Is that all there is? Is that all I am? Is that all I have come here to be? And my own experience in life is that I did, and I share this with you, I achieved that when I was in my mid-30s, and I thought, wow, I've done everything I thought I was supposed to do. I checked all the boxes, and I was not happy. And then the deeper question became, what is it that's missing? What is it that needs to happen in my experience in life in order for me to fill this apparent hole, this something missing feeling in me? And it was that drove me from outside in, from looking outside what was missing to look to see what was missing inside. And I think that's what we're up to here. That's what this work is about. That's what we're called to. And what's so beautiful about it is when somebody discovers this, perhaps for the first time, they realize that they've been, seeking and not finding because they've been seeking amiss, been chasing after, it's like Don Quixote, fighting the windmills, thinking that they're, the dragons or the enemies. And we realize what we're really fighting is our own sense of unworthiness. And that can only be filled not by one more thing or one more accomplishment or one more achievement or one more $1 million or whatever. It can only be achieved by allowing this imprisoned splendor, this deeper sense of our being, to emerge. And that's what calls us to this work most authentically and sincerely. So he suggests a journaling exercise that you do this at the end of the day. Of course, you could do it any time of day. But he says, make 4 lists. And the 4 lists are, I have. You can write this down, but of course you have it in the book too. I have, and you would write down everything that you have. And that isn't just, like your balance sheet, obviously, but everything that you have in your life. And to be completely, don't overlook anything. And then I can is the second one. I can or I am able. Everything that you can do, because don't we oftentimes get stuck and stumble over what we can't do, or what we're not able to do? We look at our limitations rather than our possibilities. So everything I can do and I'm able to do. And then number 3 is I have achieved, and your successes. So everything that you've achieved in your life, all of your successes, writing that down. This is cultivating the conditions for the emergence to take place. And then the last one is I am grateful for. I am grateful for. And I think many of us understand the power of gratitude, yes? That we have seen how powerful it can be in our life. And I have given so much thought to this gratitude, being in ministry. It's something that I talk about frequently. And what I've recognized is if there would be one spiritual notion and one spiritual practice that is probably more powerful than anything else, it would be simply the practice, the understanding of gratitude and the practice of gratitude. Because gratitude does what? It is the very opposite of what the ego does. The ego, that separate sense of self, is always looking for what's missing, or what's broken, or what's not enough. Isn't that right? That part of us, we all have that part of us. But the spirit, the truth of you, is always looking for what is. It's always there to realize and express your wholeness, your love. That's the truth. And that's what gratitude invites us to do, is to see the good in every moment, is to see what is present, what is already here, what's already fully formed, what already is here for us to partake of, to fill us up, to make us whole from that illusory whole that we think that we have. What's something that is so simple but so powerful is that for thousands of years, people have been searching for God, yeah? And really what they've been searching for is what? Just to say I found God or I found the God experience? It's the God experience, yeah. But what is the God experience? Peace, love, yeah. And isn't it really just a sense of well-being and happiness? I mean, at its core, happiness, I think, is what everyone is after. And so we developed this idea that God could provide that happiness for us. But then the problem is that we created the idea of a God that was somehow holding all the cards. That we could have a good hand if God would, deal us a good hand. And that's why people have waited for thousands of years for God to bless them. Until the recognition came that God is not up there holding the cards. There is no such thing. We created God in our image and likeness and put it on a far-off place. But the God of our knowing and God of our understanding is the Spirit that dwells within us, that already contains within it all that we need, the love and the peace and the wholeness and the joy and everything that you and I have been waiting for life to give us. And that gratitude is the way that we can begin to uncover the presence of this immanent nature of wholeness that we have been seeking. Because when I'm grateful, then I am always looking for what's already working in my life. Does anyone know this? Yes. So I like to think of gratitude as being a consciousness conditioner, waking us by way of expectation and appreciation for the good that is already at hand, even though it may be beyond our human perception. And gratitude can be the condition in which growth can happen in us. Because again, we know that the seeds are already good, but the soil sometimes is a little tainted, yeah? We don't believe in ourselves. We don't quantify the good that is already at hand. We keep waiting and looking and having a future-based sense, and nothing can grow in the future. Have you ever seen a plant grow in the future? If you have, see me after the service. I won't use it at the second service. Nothing happens in the future. So the soil in which we are going to grow is going to be the soil of the present moment. So in other words, we have to call it good now. We have to call it good now. We have to see it's fertile and rich here and now. Not one more darn thing has to happen. Not one more. Because if it did, then this whole thing would be a sham. The whole idea that Jesus said that the kingdom of God is at hand and that the fields are already ripe. And now is the acceptable time. Masters have not missed this, and they invite us to see it as well. So a prescription for this week is, if you forget everything that I've said, which is normal, by the way, so don't worry about it. You always want to have one takeaway. Last week I gave you a whole sheet, but today just think in terms of these 4 pillars, and I have, I can, I have achieved, and I am grateful. You got those? Okay. And the last one being the most important, if you forget the top 3 and just work on gratitude, see how that does not cultivate a energy in you that has a sense of optimism, possibility, strength. You will walk taller. You will look at your partner, you will look at your coworker, you will look at your job differently. Because instead of feeling that there's something missing in you, you'll feel that you're quite fortunate. And it is in that environment that the best in you can emerge. So that's what we got for this week. I'll be gone next week. I'll see you in 2 weeks, and we will continue with this series on what we can do. Blessings to you. Thank you.